a way to start out. That's so I'm going live just for 10-15 minutes here, and I wanted to talk about the enormous weight of everything. The enormous weight of everything. This is like an idea from philosophy, and it's really consequential. And I want to hopefully make it so you understand what I mean here. And so do please leave a comment, like the video. I hope this is a little vertical live stream, but I hope to get this into the algorithm. To me, it's very important. And so there's this guy, Arthur Schopenhauer, who basically has this idea in philosophy. It relates to the enormous weight of everything. And what Schopenhauer ends up saying that, well, here's how life goes is you have an idea about things and you have ideas about those ideas, and things are or be some way. And as soon as we start to find ourselves in the situation as we just would intuitively imagine it to be, everything changes. Everything suddenly changes. And this is the really core thrust of the enormous weight of everything. And it's the idea that existence or isness and ontology, just being able to name something, name and shame maybe, it becomes incredibly costly, incredibly heavy, incredibly dense, and incredibly difficult philosophically for us to manage. Hey, what's up, everyone? And yeah, do come say hi in chat too. If you're here, we can talk a little bit about this. Even though I'm not going to be live, I'm going to be done in 5 or 10 minutes or so. And so this is where the enormous weight of everything comes in handy, because we can take our ordinary judgments about the world and things we hold to be true or sensible and start to realize how big those things are. Start to realize how large and sweeping and perhaps nonsensical things become when we actually consider what we're talking about. And so I want to take a couple ordinary judgments and tell you what the enormous weight of everything actually is. And so you park a car. And so there's you in the car. There's the car in space and time in a parking spot in a city that you're parking because you and someone else decided you would go somewhere. And so your hands and your eyes and your ears and your mind and your brain and your feet and all of you is driving this big block of tin, this big block of steel with an engine and doors and door handles made out of plastic, the same material basically in the plastic door handles that powers the car. You have windshield wipers. That means you have windshield wiper fluids. You have brake lights and turn signals. So that means you have brake light and turn signal fluid in your car. And you just got there. You just got here. And so you and everyone you know decided you would get in your car, and you and your car together would go and park somewhere in space and time in a parking spot in order to go somewhere. And that somewhere is just like you and your car. There's Tom, Fred, Donnie, Marie. There's someone from New Brunswick. There's someone from Portland, Oregon, California, Dallas, Fort Worth, India. There's someone from Germany, Hamburg. There's someone from Switzerland. Wherever you want to go, Madagascar. The countries in Africa everyone always forgets. My friend Max is from Uruguay, Argentina, Chile. And so you and your car are going and parking, and everything gets so heavy, guys. That's the title of the stream again. The incredible weight of everything, or just what something is. And so you drive your car somewhere and you end up being just like the place you're going and just like the car itself. And we didn't even start to describe philosophically or in reality what this car is. Maybe it's chemistry, maybe it's biology, maybe there is a spiritual essence to it. You're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Jew, you're a secular atheist. You can be any faith tradition you want, and you get in your car and you create this enormously complex situation. And you have to beg yourself, what do I base this on? I base this on the history of 1800 years ago. I base this on the early church. I base this on the life of Jesus Christ himself. I base this on the story of King David, or I base this on the story of Muhammad, or I base this on the story of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Could be anyone. It could be anyone. Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Why is it the case I have freedom to choose to get into my car to build this history right here? And why do I have to say it's history? It's molecules, it's chemistry, it's the fundamental fine-tuning constants of the universe. It's what information does before it goes to sleep and goes to die. Hey, Scott, I'm just doing, it's a little more it's philosophy, guided meditation, whatever you want to call it. The video is just titled The Enormous Weight of Everything, the enormous weight of what something is. The enormous weight of what something is. And so you and your engine block and the plastic and your handprint, according to Schopenhauer, and according to philosophers who believe something more than Arthur Schopenhauer, would tell you that your handprint is both on the purpose of this event in the first place, but your handprint is also on how you end up describing it. Why you say it's true you got in your car and you drove somewhere, and you drove somewhere that's just like you getting in your car. And that place that's just like you getting in your car could be like anywhere. And when you decide that it can be like anywhere, you can decide it can be like anything or nothing. This is the Eastern sort of approach. They say you can still be Christian, Muslim, Jew, secular atheist, scientific, scientism. You can be a politician, you can be political, you can be ideological or an ideologue. You still chose to get in your car and drive somewhere. And to a Taoist, they say, well, the process and change and interpretation and how you decide to say what you say this is, or what happened and what a car is, what you are, where you drove to, these are all parts of the Tao, just the nature of things, nature itself. And so if you're a philosopher, you might say, well, this solves things. The process of change in my pathway, my journey, my isness, all is natural things, nothing supernatural. The Tao has made this much more lightweight. Everything is not as heavy as I said it was. The incredible weight of everything is not that incredible. Taoism has fixed me. It turns out this may be true and it may just not be true. The Tao may also, as we understand it, be nature's way of providing a simpler description of what something is, what something can be. The Tao itself may not really have philosophical consequence in the way you wish it would. It's not epistemic, it's not metaphysical. It isn't about the incredible weight of everything. It is about simplifying that weight. It's about looking at it slightly differently. And the truth of that may be something mystical, spiritual. It may be something that Christians, Jews, Muslims, and secular atheists all borrow from, what Hindus may borrow from. It may not be. It may be something closer to primitive religion. It may be asking us to pick up what primitive religion is. That's still not about particles, the plastic, the engine, the place you drove, the chalk lines in the parking garage or parking structure that you went to when you decided to get in your car. And so when you leave that Taoistic, almost dharmic sort of sense of where you were with Taoism, things are back to being incredibly heavy again. There's not just some simple description that you got in your car and drove somewhere. Anyone can get in their car and drive anywhere, and you haven't told a story about reality or existence yet. Now, Buddhism may call on you to talk about dependent origination. And once again, Buddhists will look at the Christians, Muslims, Jews, secular atheists, everyone, their brother, cousin, Donnie and Marie Osmond. And here's what happens. Here's what ultimately happens. Buddhism tells you that this event where you're describing what you're describing and what you're doing and what can be said, if it's not describing something to say that you got in your car, what is it then? And Buddhists will say, well, perhaps your attachment or the form, what emptiness constructs itself into in just a moment there, somehow does talk about the incredible heavy weight of everything because that's what you're talking about, or nothing that mystical. It's just something that you can choose on, settle on, and it is consistent with reality to say the incredible weight of everything seems to persist. The incredible weight of something seems to persist, but at the same time, as a Buddhist, you go back and you'll look at this and say, well, I can choose to just see it otherwise. I can choose to see it as naturalism, molecules, chemistry, make it spiritual if I wish. And once again, this just may not be right. It may not be right that there's such a thing as emptiness. It may not be the case that there's such a thing as form. Even a Buddhist who's devout or Taoist or a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Hindu can have doubt and skepticism and still be that religion. You're allowed to have nuance in your own views. This isn't part of the incredible weight of everything. It's not the complexity of understanding what a door handle is Is that different when you drive to the mall with the family, or you go to drive through and get fast food? You're getting gas on your way to work on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. None of this actually alleviates the philosophical problems that Arthur Schopenhauer wanted us to initially introduce. None of this actually resolves the tension that exists in philosophy. The tension that exists in philosophy is that saying something such as a chemical molecule exists, and this describes the gasoline in your car and the door handle itself, says what something is in an efficient way. And people who are antagonistic to religion would say, well, the Taoist covering of naturalism doesn't tell you that much that you didn't know before. It's a poetic way to kind of put thought principles in place, but chemistry itself actually does tell you what something is. And it turns out you can challenge Arthur Schopenhauer if you want to be a secular atheist or understand how a naturalist sees things, or you're wondering, why does everything have to have this incredible weight of everything? And it also seems like I know something about it. And it also seems like I need to know this before I decide I need to know what the weight of everything is. And you end up moving on and you go forward. And what happens? What happens next? Well, what happens next is chemistry makes way for more fundamental physics, for atomic physics, for particle physics, for field theories, for descriptions of wave functions, of pure mathematical spaces known as topologies. These give way to probabilities, and you go from abstract to measured, back to abstract, back to measured again, and you realize you thought about it all wrong. You have information projecting somewhere in the universe, and this is just supposedly one way we approximate the chemicals we saw in the first place. And so you still didn't really know something in a grounded metaphysical sense. You just have this perception that something like chemistry, a category, a label, a process, a method, some way of saying something is some way, is a lighter way to say what the world is. But you still have this supposition, the incredible weight of everything. Everything is so heavy. Being is heavy. Being is heavy. When you choose not to make it heavy, that's fine. You are just a lighter way of being, but you are not that heavier way of being. And so welcome to philosophy. That's why I wanted to go live, is this just kind of got stuck in my brain like one of those brain worms. And I wanted to talk through it. I wanted to talk through why everything is so heavy. Our will finds us not just in these chemical and naturalistic and religious descriptions of what something is, but in reality, our wills, or what we call our will, what we call our sense data, our perception, finds us in the midst of these heavy situations which are some way. Skepticism helps you from picking up the wrong stuff. Doubt helps you from picking up the wrong stuff. Reason, logic, intuition, sense, all of these things help you from picking up the wrong stuff and from forgetting that it is the case. The Buddhists, the Taoists, the Muslims, the Christians, the secular atheists, humanists, Hindus, Sikhs, Baha'i, Scientologists, everyone has a different way of managing these incredibly heavy problems of what something is or could be. And so here we are. That's the end of it. That's the end of it. Arthur Schopenhauer is just some guy. He doesn't relate to these religious worldview traditions in some way. He doesn't take you someplace that you haven't already been. And you get back, and if you actually picture yourself, if you actually picture someone like a cartoon character putting on their plastic shoes, their plastic leather suede fabric shoes, getting in their car, which has leather, plastic, suede, iron, tin, aluminum, it has an engine block, your horsepower going into this car, which has its own horsepower. And as you drive to the store, you start somewhere. You were suggested to go to that store from someplace. You get in your car, you drive to that store just like 100 of other people. And that store itself is like you getting in the car. And that store itself is also is a place that is just like you getting in the car, but with totally different descriptions. Maybe they do have iron, tin, leather, suede, plastic. Maybe they did use energy. They gave energy back by going into the store business, into opening a store. And at the first place, at the first time, someone asked if this is a guided meditation. And if you're meditating, or you can do so actively, you can be present, aware. Even if it looks silly, it doesn't matter. It's for you. And so if you walk through why everything is incredibly heavy, why beingness is incredibly heavy, how someone sees it this way, you can see that you getting in a car and going to a place like lots of other people, which are like things like you getting in your car and having these descriptions which dive underneath the earth and pick up our history, they pick up the future, they pick up ideas that are smarter than history, ideas that are spiritual, ideas that are rational and irrational, ideas that are intuitive, and ideas that are really hardly earned. They're hardly earned because they're rare, and they're hardly earned because it's difficult to earn them. And so you ultimately end up, after all of this, somewhere in a world. Hey, see you, Dale. Thanks for stopping by. And so at the end of this, you'll have a, you're left with a book. And, this is where this all goes. This is where my meditation went, is Arthur Schopenhauer lived a life. He wrote a book called The World as Will and Representation. It isn't the theme of this video. However, it is one of the most important ideas. And he took a lot of the weight of not knowing what things are, not knowing why the world appears some way, why our representations appear ordered sometimes and lost other times. He solved a lot of the problems that he didn't believe you can just become a Taoist, become a Buddhist, become a Hindu, a Christian, a Muslim, an atheist, a humanist, a philosopher, maybe a nihilist, maybe an existentialist. You could become any of these things. But this idea itself seems to take some of our pretense that the world, everything that is some way, is so heavy. And what a beautiful idea this is. And that's what I'd like to close with. You can make it 10 times more complicated than I have to imagine chemistry, particles, information, nothing, our spiritual beliefs about nature being what the world is actually made out of. You can also make it 100 times simpler, and you can allow ideas of inspiring people who have existed the world over, who have perhaps found the way to split the difference. They found the way to at least find their equal as people who have considered these types of problems in the past. And from there, that's the end of the story. That's it.